So here's the thing about first contact with alien civilizations. Everyone imagines it'll be this grand, meaningful moment with carefully chosen representatives of humanity stepping forward to greet our cosmic neighbors. Philosophers, diplomats, maybe a Nobel Prize winner or two. People who've prepared their whole lives for this exact scenario. Instead, humanity got Marcus Webb. Marcus was a maintenance technician at the International Space Cooperation Facility, and his primary qualification for becoming humanity's first official telepathic contact was that he happened to be elbow-deep in the break room coffee machine when the aliens arrived. The coffee machine that, and this is important, the Director of Interstellar Relations desperately needed working before the big meeting. So when the Galactic Council announced they needed a human volunteer immediately for their standard telepathic screening process, and the director looked around the room, Marcus was right there. Convenient, volunteered, doomed. The Galactic Council took their protocols seriously. Every species joining the interstellar community had to undergo telepathic evaluation. Standard procedure, they said. Perfectly safe, they promised. Just a quick peek into the cognitive processes to make sure you're not, secretly planning galactic domination or running on some kind of hive mind situation that would complicate trade negotiations. Enter Velcara. Velcara was what you'd get if someone took an amethyst geode, gave it 4 arms and an ego the size of a small moon. She was the Council's most prestigious telepathic evaluator, with 6,000 years of experience and a resume that included reading the minds of 847 different species. She'd scanned hive minds, group consciousness collectives, species that thought in colors, species that thought in mathematical equations, and one particularly memorable species that thought exclusively in interpretive dance concepts. She'd seen it all, done it all, been completely unimpressed by all of it. As far as Velcara was concerned, scanning this human was just another boring Tuesday. She'd read the preliminary reports. Humans were a young species, relatively simple bilateral symmetry, carbon-based, nothing exotic. They probably thought in straightforward linear patterns about food, shelter, and reproduction like most primitive species. This would take 5 minutes, tops, and then she could get back to her meditation chamber and the 17 scholarly papers she was peer-reviewing. Marcus sat in the scanning chair, which had clearly not been designed for human anatomy, and was about as comfortable as sitting on a pile of geometry. Velcara floated across from him, her crystalline body refracting the lights into little rainbow patterns on the walls. Pretty, actually. Marcus made a mental note that it looked kind of like that Pink Floyd album cover. "This will not hurt," Velcara said, her voice resonating like a wine glass being tapped with a fork. "Simply relax your mind and allow me to observe your cognitive patterns. I have performed this procedure 14,683 times without incident." Cool, Marcus said, trying to figure out where to look. Did crystals have eyes? Was he supposed to make eye contact with the glowy bits? So I just think about stuff? Think about whatever you normally think about. I am merely observing the structure of your consciousness, not the content. Your thoughts are private and irrelevant to this evaluation. Famous last words, really. Velcara initiated the link. Her consciousness reached out and touched the surface of Marcus's mind, ready to catalog another boring thought structure for another boring species that would join the galactic community and proceed to do boring galactic community things like trade agreements and cultural exchanges. What she found instead was chaos, not disorder, not randomness, but a cascading, ricocheting, multiplex torrent of simultaneous cognitive processes that hit her prepared consciousness like a fire hose hitting a wine glass. She'd spent 3 days preparing for a gentle stream and walked into a Category 5 hurricane. Velcara's crystalline body flashed through colors that didn't have names in most languages. Her 4 arms locked rigid, and then, for the first time in 6,000 years of telepathic practice, she made a sound that roughly translated to "what the actual," before her consciousness just noped out completely, and she collapsed onto the floor. Marcus blinked. Is that normal?" It was not normal. The medical team arrived at a speed that suggested they'd been waiting just outside the door, which probably should have told Marcus something about how these screenings usually went. They swarmed around Velcara's unconscious form, scanning her with devices that beeped in what Marcus could only describe as a concerned manner. Leading the chaos was Dr. Finch, whose species had evolved from something bird-like and apparently kept the evolutionary anxiety that comes from being prey animals. His feathers were doing this thing where they kept puffing up and flattening down, which Marcus suspected was the alien equivalent of stress sweating. "What did you do?" Dr. Finch squawked, his translator giving his voice a perpetual tone of someone whose day had just gone catastrophically wrong. "I sat in a chair," Marcus said, holding up his hands. "She said, think about normal stuff, so I thought about normal stuff. That's it, I didn't even move." "Velcara has scanned 847 species," Dr. Finch said, checking a holographic readout that showed Velcara's vital signs doing what appeared to be a very concerning dance. "She has scanned hive minds with billions of constituent consciousnesses. She has scanned the Vexnari, whose thoughts exist partially in other dimensions. She once scanned a species whose entire consciousness was a single continuous scream of existential dread, and she wrote a paper about it. She does not just faint." "Well, I don't know what to tell you, Doc. Maybe she had a bad morning." Dr. Finch's feathers did the puffy thing again. Telepaths train for decades specifically to handle disturbing or chaotic thought patterns. Velcara has handled thoughts from species that would drive lesser beings mad. She is quite literally the best at what she does. He paused, checking another readout. "What exactly were you thinking about?" Marcus tried to remember. Well, when she mentioned that thing about cognitive patterns, it reminded me of this scene from Star Wars, you know, the cantina scene, and then I was thinking about whether you guys had something like that, like an alien bar, which made me think about bars, which reminded me of this really embarrassing thing I said at a party in 8th grade that I still cringe about sometimes. And then I was doing the mental math on whether enough time had passed that it didn't matter, which meant I was thinking about the Pythagorean theorem for some reason. And then there was this song stuck in my head. You know that really annoying one? Goes like da 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 da. It's been there for 3 days. Dr. Finch stared at him. Several of his head feathers stood completely upright, and I guess I was also thinking about whether hot dogs are sandwiches, because my coworker and I have this ongoing debate about it. I say no, structurally distinct, but he's a purist about the definition of sandwich. Oh, and I was wondering if I'd locked my apartment this morning, but I do that every morning, so that's normal. That was all simultaneous? Dr. Finch's voice had gone up half an octave. I mean, yeah, that's just how thinking works. No, Dr. Finch said slowly. That is not how thinking works. That is not how thinking works for anyone in the known galaxy. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? You're thinking right now, aren't you? Probably multiple things. Like, you're listening to me, but you're also worried about the crystal lady, and you're probably thinking about what forms you need to fill out, and maybe what you're having for dinner. The doctor's feathers were now at maximum puff. I am thinking about one thing, the current emergency. When I finish addressing this emergency, I will think about the next thing. This is how all sentient beings process consciousness. Sequential cognitive flow. That sounds boring. That sounds sane, Dr. Finch snapped. Your species thinks about multiple complex topics simultaneously, including abstract mathematical concepts, social embarrassment from a decade ago, ongoing debates about food categorization, and repetitive auditory loops, all while maintaining a conversation? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds weird. Behind them, Velcara made a groaning sound that the translator helpfully rendered as a color somewhere between regret and migraine. She was waking up, which Dr. Finch seemed to consider both a relief and a problem. Do not, Dr. Finch said, pointing a wing claw at Marcus, think anything else until we figure out what's wrong with you. I literally can't stop thinking. That's not how brains work. Then try thinking about one thing quietly, something calm. Marcus nodded and tried to think about something peaceful, like that beach vacation he'd taken 5 years ago, which reminded him he needed to renew his passport, which meant going to the post office, which was always a nightmare, which made him think about that time he'd seen a guy have a complete meltdown at the post office over stamp prices, which was honestly kind of funny, but also sad. which made him wonder what alien post offices were like. Dr. Finch's scanner started beeping more urgently. "Stop whatever you're doing. I'm just sitting here. Your brain activity just spiked 40%. What were you thinking about?" "Alien post offices." Dr. Finch made a sound that didn't translate but definitely meant, "I need a drink." The Galactic Council chamber looked exactly like every stereotype of alien government buildings. Lots of floating holographic display seats arranged in a circle that somehow suggested everyone was equally important, while also having a very clear hierarchy and lighting that seemed designed to make everyone look either ominous or constipated, depending on their species' facial structure. Ambassador Crix presided over the emergency session with all the urgency of continental drift. He was slug-like, moved at the speed of bureaucracy, and had a tendency to repeat things in slightly different ways that made Marcus want to check if his translator was broken, or if the ambassador just really loved the sound of his own voice. "We are here today, gathered in this session convened at this time, to discuss the matter at hand, specifically the issue before us, regarding the situation with the humans," Crix announced, taking approximately 45 seconds to say what could have been said in 5. Marcus sat in what he'd been told was the witness chair, but felt more like the defendant's chair. Around him, representatives from a dozen species watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to what he was pretty sure was the alien equivalent of someone trying not to laugh. On the main display, footage of Velkara's collapse played on loop. It looked worse in replay. The way her crystalline structure had flashed through that seizure of colors, the rigidity of her arms, the way she'd just dropped like someone had unplugged her. It looked, Marcus had to admit, pretty bad. "The question we must address, the issue we must confront, the problem we must solve," Crix continued, "is what to do about the human consciousness, the human mind, the human cognitive structure." A counselor who looked like someone had given a mantis shrimp the ability to wear robes spoke up. "The data suggests humans may be a psychic weapon. Perhaps they evolved this consciousness as a defense mechanism." "Or," countered a floating jellyfish situation in a containment sphere, "their brain structure is simply too chaotic to properly scan. Primitive species often have disorganized neural patterns." "With all due respect," said a third counselor who seemed to be made of living metal, "the scans suggest something different. The human brain isn't disorganized. It's doing far too much simultaneously. The question is whether this is weaponized or if they're simply too cognitively challenged to realize how abnormal they are." Marcus raised his hand. "Hi, yeah, human here, I can hear you, just so you know. I'm right here." Crix gestured with an appendage. "The human, Marcus Webb, the representative, the witness, would like to speak, to address the council, to provide input." "Look," Marcus said, standing up because sitting felt wrong for this. "I don't know what happened with the telepathy thing. I was just thinking normal thoughts, human thoughts, the kind of stuff everyone on Earth thinks about all the time. We're not weapons. We're not chaos engines. We're just regular people trying to get through the day." "Then explain," the mantis shrimp counselor said, "what you were thinking that caused a 6,000-year-old telepath to lose consciousness." Marcus walked over to a display panel that he hoped was a whiteboard equivalent. "Okay, so imagine thoughts are like tabs on a web browser. You guys have browsers, right? No? Okay, imagine like different windows. Most species you're saying have one window open at a time?" The council members looked at each other. Several nodded. "Humans have like minimum 12 windows open. All the time." Marcus started drawing on the display, which thankfully accepted his finger as input. He drew a stick figure head. "So at any given moment we've got our main thought, right? The thing we're actively focused on. But then we've also got this running commentary about the main thought. And then we've got background processing like that song you can't get out of your head, or remembering that thing you need to do later. And then there's the anxiety subroutine, which is just constantly checking if we forgot something or if we're about to die. And then there's the creative thread that's always running, imagining scenarios that'll never happen." He drew more stick figures, added some arrows, and what might have been a cat, but could also have been a dog. His artistic skills had not improved since 8th grade. "And that's just baseline," Marcus continued. "That's like brushing your teeth level consciousness. When we're actually doing something that requires thought, it gets way more complicated. Like right now I'm explaining this to you, but I'm also watching your reactions, wondering if I'm making sense, thinking about how this drawing looks terrible, remembering that I need to call my mom later, and there's still that song in my head. The council chamber had gone very quiet. "And this is normal?" the jellyfish asked. "This is how all humans think?" I mean, yeah. Some people are better at it than others. Some people have more tabs open. Some have fewer. But yeah, this is standard human consciousness. Crix leaned forward slowly, which took about 15 seconds. "And you indicated that this was you on a calm day, a relaxed day, a peaceful day." "Oh yeah, today's pretty chill. You should see when we're stressed, or creative, or determined to solve a problem. That's when things get really wild." Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts. Like my friend Jenny is a novelist. When she's writing, she's simultaneously thinking about the plot, the characters, what the reader will think, what happens 3 chapters later, whether her sentence structure is boring, if she needs more coffee, and planning her grocery list. All at the same time, she writes great books. "Impossible," the metal counselor said flatly. "Or my cousin Rick, chess champion. When he's playing, he's thinking about the current board state, the previous 3 moves, the next 5 potential moves, what his opponent is thinking, what his opponent thinks. He's thinking a completely different game he played 2 years ago and whether he left the stove on. And he wins tournaments." Several counselors were making the universal gesture of beings reconsidering their life choices. "Oh, and my buddy Dave. He works 3 jobs, runs 2 side hustles, coaches youth soccer, and is learning Japanese for fun. I don't know when he sleeps, but his brain is just always doing all of it." Velkara, who'd been silent until now, made a sound like crystal wind chimes having a panic attack. Against the better judgment of literally everyone involved, the council decided to try the telepathic scan one more time. This decision was made primarily because the alternative was to admit that humanity had accidentally broken their screening process, and bureaucracy hates admitting things are broken. Enter Zorn. If Velkara was the wise, experienced master of telepathy, Zorn was the confident young hotshot who thought experience was overrated. He was from a species that looked like someone had taken a starfish and made it iridescent, and he'd been making noise for the past decade about how the old guard was too set in their ways, too cautious, too afraid of new experiences. When he heard that Velkara had fainted during a human scan, his first response was laughter. His second was volunteering to show everyone how it was done. "With all respect to Master Velkara," Zorn announced to the council, his 5 arms gesturing dramatically, "perhaps 6,000 years of easy assignments has made her soft. The younger generation of telepaths trains specifically for difficult cognitive environments. I have scanned thought forms that exist in non-linear time. A simple human will be no problem." Dr. Finch, who by this point looked like he'd aged several years in several hours, tried to protest. "Perhaps we should wait, do more research, test with simpler cognitive connections first." "Unnecessary," Zorn said, settling into the scanning chamber across from Marcus. "I've undergone extensive mental conditioning. Consider this the psychic equivalent of a hazmat suit. Full shielding, maximum filters, complete protection." Marcus, who'd been told to just be himself and think normal thoughts, felt like he should probably warn this guy. "Listen, dude, I don't know what happened with the crystal lady, but maybe take it slow." "Your concern is noted and dismissed," Zorn said, his arms arranging themselves into what was probably a meditative configuration. "Initiating link in 3, 2, 1. The connection formed, and Zorn's consciousness slipped into Marcus's mind with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong before and was about to learn a valuable life lesson. From Zorn's perspective, Marcus's consciousness looked like someone had taken a perfectly normal thought stream and multiplied it by 12, then set it on fire, then added a soundtrack. The main thought thread was clear enough. Marcus was wondering if this was safe and thinking about what he'd have for dinner later. Logical, sequential, normal. But then there were the other threads, Thread 2 was a conversation Marcus was having with himself about whether he'd locked his apartment, complete with a memory playback of leaving his apartment, which then triggered a memory of a different time he'd left his apartment, which somehow connected to a childhood memory of losing his house keys. Thread 3 was song lyrics, just an entire song playing on loop, not even a good song. Some commercial jingle from 15 years ago that apparently had taken up permanent residence in Marcus's brain. Thread 4 was anxiety, just pure, distilled anxiety about various things. Did he turn off the coffee machine before leaving? Was that mole on his arm normal? Had he been rude to the alien jellyfish earlier? Should he have said something different? Thread 5 was what Zorn could only describe as fan fiction. Marcus was running a complete simulation of what he'd do if zombies suddenly appeared, including defensive positions, supply needs, and whether the space station had enough canned goods. And that was just the surface level. Deeper down were layers of memory, emotion, future planning, and self-reflection all running simultaneously. Marcus was thinking about the present, remembering the past, planning the future, and critiquing his own thoughts about all of it at the same time. It wasn't chaos. That's what broke Zorn's confidence. It was organized. Every thread connected to every other thread in this massive web of consciousness that somehow functioned as a cohesive whole. It was beautiful and terrifying and absolutely overwhelming. Zorn lasted 15 seconds. Longer than Velkara, but still. As his consciousness retreated from Marcus's mind, he managed to gasp out, "It's not chaos. It's all of it. All the time. Everything at once. How are you not exhausted? How do you exist like this?" Then he fainted, his 5 arms spreading out like a fallen star. Dr. Finch didn't even look surprised anymore. He'd moved past surprise through concern and landed firmly in acceptance. "Medical team to the scanning chamber. Again. And someone please tell the council that we need to completely rethink our approach to human consciousness." Marcus looked down at the unconscious telepath. "I feel like I should apologize, but I still don't know what I did wrong." "You existed," Dr. Finch said tiredly. "You existed exactly as humans exist, and apparently that's too much for the galaxy to handle." "Is that going to be a problem?" Dr. Finch's feathers did the stress puff thing. "Marcus, I stopped knowing what constitutes a problem about 3 hours ago. At this point, I'm just documenting the disaster." Velkara requested a private meeting with Marcus 3 days after her initial collapse. She'd spent that time recovering, meditating, and apparently preparing herself for round 2 because when Marcus entered the meditation chamber, she'd surrounded herself with what looked like psychic bubble wrap. "Before we begin," Velkara said, her crystalline voice steadier now, "I want to make clear that I am not attempting another link. I am simply trying to understand what I experienced. Do you consent to this conversation?" "Sure," Marcus said, settling into a cushion that was definitely more comfortable than the scanning chair. "Though I'm not sure how much help I'll be. I still don't really get what went wrong." "That is precisely what I need to explain. What I experienced was not wrong. It was simply far beyond what I had prepared for." Velkara's colors shifted to something contemplative, like deep ocean blue mixed with sunset orange. "Tell me, Marcus, when you think, do you hear a voice in your head?" "Yeah, obviously. My internal monologue. Everyone has one." "No," Velkara said gently. "They do not. Most species process thoughts as impressions, concepts, or feelings. The idea of thoughts as spoken language is uniquely human." Marcus blinked. "Wait, what? How do you think without words? How do you think with them? Language is a communication tool, not a thinking tool. Most beings simply know what they're thinking without narrating it to themselves." "That's insane. So when you're like trying to figure something out, you don't talk through it in your head?" "I simply arrive at conclusions through logical or intuitive processes. But humans, you translate all of your thoughts into language, constantly narrating your own existence to yourselves." Marcus thought about that, which of course meant his internal monologue started commenting on the concept of internal monologue, which created a weird recursive loop. "Huh, yeah, I guess I do that. Is that bad?" "Not bad. Simply one of many processes happening simultaneously." Velkara shifted her position, her crystalline structure catching the light. But that is only the beginning. Humans also have visual imagination, yes? You mean picturing things in your head? Yeah. Most species do not have this ability, or have it in very limited form. But humans can create detailed images in their minds, can imagine scenarios that do not exist, can visualize the past and potential futures. Okay, that one actually surprises me. How do you plan for things if you can't imagine them? We think through concepts and sequences, but we do not see them as you do. Velkara's colors shifted again, to something that might have been awe. During our link, I witnessed you simultaneously narrating your thoughts, imagining multiple visual scenarios, processing emotions about past events, planning future actions, and maintaining a running analysis of your own mental state. This is not exceptional for humans. I mean, that's just normal thinking. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but yeah, that's baseline consciousness. And you do this every waking moment? And sometimes in dreams, yeah. Velkara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that the translator struggled with, but Marcus interpreted as profound respect. Marcus, human consciousness is not chaotic. It is not simple. It is possibly the most complex cognitive structure we have ever encountered. You are running what we would consider multiple separate consciousness streams as a single integrated experience. The processing power required, the energy expenditure, the sheer mental coordination, it should not be possible. But it is possible. Obviously, we're doing it. Yes, and that is what caused me to faint. I prepared to scan a single thought stream, perhaps two. Instead, I encountered what appeared to be a dozen distinct cognitive processes, all running simultaneously, all interconnected, all functioning as a unified consciousness. It was like expecting to observe a candle and instead finding myself standing before a star. Marcus felt weirdly proud and embarrassed at the same time. So we're not broken? Broken? No. You are extraordinary, exhausting, but extraordinary. Velkara's colors shifted to something warmer. I have one more question, and it is the one that truly concerns the Council. If what I experienced was you on a calm day, what happens when humans are stressed? Creative? Determined? Oh. Marcus thought about that, which meant thinking about times he'd been in flow state or crisis mode or deeply focused on a problem. Well, everything kind of intensifies, I guess. More threads, faster processing, deeper connections between ideas. Like, when my friend Jenny is really in the zone writing, she says she loses track of time completely. Hours pass like minutes because her brain is just fully engaged in the creative process. And your cousin, the chess player? Rick says when he's in a tournament, it's like his brain becomes this prediction machine. He's not just seeing the board, he's seeing hundreds of possible boards all at once, rating them, analyzing them, choosing the best path forward. He describes it as beautiful. And your friend with multiple occupations? Dave's a freak of nature, honestly. He just doesn't get tired the way normal people do. His brain is always spinning up new projects, new ideas, new things to try. He says sitting still and thinking about one thing sounds like torture. Velkara's crystals were doing the flash warning thing again, but softer this time, more controlled. Do you understand what you are describing? You are telling me that humans can voluntarily increase their cognitive processing beyond what rendered me unconscious. That your baseline consciousness, the thing that broke our scanner, is merely your resting state. When you put it like that, it sounds bad again. Not bad, Velkara said. Terrifying, impressive, unprecedented, but not bad. She paused, her colors cycling through what Marcus was learning to recognize as deep thought. The Council must know this. They must understand that humanity does not think differently as a matter of culture or choice. Your consciousness is fundamentally distinct from anything we have encountered. This changes everything about how we must approach your species. Is that going to be a problem? For us joining the galactic community? A problem? Velkara made a sound like crystal chimes, laughing. Marcus, humanity is going to change the galactic community. The question is whether the galactic community is ready for it. Probably not. Marcus said. Definitely not, Velkara agreed. But I suppose that has never stopped humans before. The Galactic Council's final decision came down 3 weeks later, after extensive debate, multiple committee reviews, and what Marcus heard was an unprecedented amount of arguing about cognitive theory and psychic safety protocols. Ambassador Crix delivered the verdict with all his characteristic speed and redundancy. The Council has decided, has determined, has concluded that humanity shall be accepted into the galactic community, welcomed into the interstellar collective, granted membership in the Cosmic Alliance. A pause, during which several humans in the observation deck started celebrating, however with conditions, stipulations, and requirements. The celebrating stopped. Humanity is hereby classified, designated, and labeled as a psychically hazardous species, a cognitive risk class, a mental danger category. This is not a judgment of character, not a condemnation of your nature, not a criticism of your consciousness, but rather an acknowledgement of fact, a recognition of reality, an acceptance of observable data. Dr. Finch stepped forward, looking somehow both relieved and exhausted. He'd been the primary author of the new protocols, which Marcus knew had required basically rewriting the entire telepathic screening handbook. What this means practically is that all telepathic contact with humans requires extensive preparation, proper shielding, and hazard compensation pay. No telepath will be required to link with human consciousness without full informed consent and appropriate safety measures. Additionally, a council member added, humanity will be providing consultants to help telepathic species understand and prepare for human cognitive patterns. We need to know how your minds work if we are to coexist safely. Everyone looked at Marcus. Wait, me? Marcus said. I'm a maintenance technician. My qualification is that I have a human brain, which apparently is enough to break telepaths. That's not really consultant material. You are the human who has experienced telepathic contact and can articulate the experience, Dr. Finch said. That makes you the most qualified person in your species. Congratulations on your promotion. And that's how Marcus Webb, maintenance technician and owner of one aggressively multi-threaded consciousness, became humanity's official cognitive consultant to the Galactic Council. His job description was essentially help aliens understand why humans are like this. And his qualification was survived being himself. 6 months later, Marcus was back at the space station, back at his maintenance job because the consultant gig was only part-time and didn't pay enough to quit his day job. He was elbow deep in the coffee machine again, the same coffee machine that had started this whole mess when a new alien species arrived for their screening. They were sort of triangular, sort of crystalline, and very nervous. Marcus had learned to recognize the signs, the way they looked around the station, checking the walls, the ceiling, the floor as if something might jump out at them. One of them approached Marcus, their translator rendering their voice as hesitant. Excuse me, are you human? Guilty as charged, Marcus said, wrestling with a particularly stubborn filter basket. We have been told humans are psychically hazardous, that your thoughts can render telepaths unconscious, that your consciousness operates on principles unknown to galactic science. They paused. Is this propaganda? Exaggeration? Marcus looked up at the being, at their genuine concern and confusion. All around the station he could see the warning signs that had been posted, bright yellow placards that read, Caution, Human Cognitive Zone, Telepaths proceed with appropriate shielding. He thought about Velkara, recovering in her meditation chamber after their first contact, about Zorn, who'd gone back to school to study human consciousness and was now writing a dissertation about it, about the dozen telepaths he'd trained, walking them through the bizarre reality of human thought processes, watching their expressions shift from skepticism to horror to fascination. He thought about Jenny and her novels, Rick and his chess games, Dave and his impossible schedule. He thought about the billions of humans back on Earth, every one of them running their own mental orchestra, completely unaware that this wasn't normal, that they were doing something the rest of the galaxy considered impossible. It's not propaganda, Marcus said finally. We're just people. We think the way we think, live the way we live. But yeah, apparently our brains are weird by galactic standards. Really weird. And dangerous? Marcus considered that. Dangerous. The word felt wrong, but he understood why it got used. Not dangerous like a weapon. More like dangerous the way a busy highway is dangerous, or the ocean is dangerous, not because we're trying to hurt anyone, but because we're operating at a level and speed that catches people off guard if they're not ready for it. The alien seemed to process this. You seem very calm about being classified as hazardous. Well, what am I going to do about it? I can't change how my brain works, and I wouldn't want to if I could. This is just who we are. He finally got the filter basket free and pulled it out triumphantly. Besides, could be worse. We could have failed the screening entirely. What would have happened then? No idea. Probably wouldn't have been allowed to join the galactic community. So I guess we should be grateful. We didn't pass the test exactly, but we broke it in an interesting enough way that they let us in anyway. From across the station, Dr. Finch called out, his feathers doing their characteristic stress puff. Marcus, we need you in the briefing room. The Velnari delegation wants to know if humans dream in multiple thought streams simultaneously. Do we? The triangular alien asked. Marcus grinned. Oh, you have no idea. Human dreams are a whole other level of weird. Be right there. He turned back to the alien. Welcome to the galaxy, by the way. You're going to love it here. It's chaotic and strange, and nothing works quite the way you expect it to. Kind of like the inside of a human brain, actually. As he walked toward the briefing room, Marcus's mind was already spinning through multiple threads. What he'd say to the delegation about dreams, whether he'd locked his apartment this morning, that same stupid song that had been stuck in his head for months now, whether the triangular aliens found his joke funny or offensive, what he'd make for dinner, and a running commentary on all of these thoughts that sounded suspiciously like his own voice narrating his life back to himself. Just another day in the life of a psychically hazardous species. Behind him, the triangular alien watched him go, then looked at one of their companions. I do not understand humans at all. Nobody does, Dr. Finch said, passing by with a stack of data pads. That is precisely the problem. Or the charm. I have stopped trying to decide which. The coffee machine beeped, signaling that it was ready to dispense caffeinated beverages. Somewhere in the diplomatic wing, Velkara was meditating, her consciousness carefully shielded, still recovering from the day she'd learned that the universe was stranger and more wonderful than 6,000 years of experience had led her to believe. And Marcus Webb, maintenance technician and accidental ambassador for human consciousness, went off to explain to yet another group of confused aliens why humanity thought the way it did. Not because he had all the answers. Not because he was special or particularly enlightened, but simply because he was human, and being human meant thinking about 17 different things at once, including whether hot dogs were sandwiches. The debate, incidentally, was still ongoing. As Marcus disappeared into the briefing room, his mind was already working through his explanation, planning his words, remembering previous presentations, worrying about whether he'd say something wrong, imagining how the aliens might react, and still, persistently, playing that same annoying jingle from 15 years ago. Somewhere in the depths of human consciousness there was a thought about thoughts, a wonder about wondering, a dream about dreaming. And the galaxy, for all its vast intelligence and ancient wisdom, was only just beginning to understand that humanity had been doing this all along. Welcome to the galactic community, humanity. You broke the test, rewrote the rules, and made everyone reconsider what consciousness could be. It was, Dr. Finch would later write in his official report, the most human thing they could have possibly done.